Floors. In this video, we'll learn how to model floors in Revit. There are two main parts to modeling floors in Revit. One is sketching the boundary or the outline of the floor, and two, creating the layers of the floor similar to creating wall types. Let's take a look at the first part of creating floors, that is, to make the boundary. To begin with, I'll model 4 walls, and we'll create 2 floors within these walls, one on level 1 and one on level 2. We'll start on level 1. If you go to your Architecture tab, Build Panel, you can see the Floor tool is right here. If you select the Floor tool, you go into Sketch Mode. You know that it's sketch mode by 2 main reasons. One, everything that has been modeled so far turns to a halftone or is lighter. And 2, you can see this red X and this green check, and those will tell you that you're in sketch mode. To create a boundary for floor, you need to create a continuous loop. If there are any intersecting lines, or if the loop is not closed, Revit will not create the floor. Let's begin. You can see here that you are going to draw the boundary line, and you can select from these tools to create them. The tool that you most likely will use most often is the Pick Walls tool. There's a main reason for this. Let's go ahead and pick the walls. You can go and select each wall individually, or to be more efficient, you can hover over one wall and hit the Tab key to select them all. If I left click, you'll see that I have created a closed loop with magenta lines. When you're in sketch mode, as you draw, you will create magenta lines. I'll delete the ones we just created. Now, since this is on level 1, and it is, you can see in your properties palette, this is just a generic 12-inch thick floor. I'm going to go ahead and select one of these lines and use the flip selection to push the boundary of the line to the outside of the walls. I'll go ahead and select the green arrow to finish sketch mode, and now we've created a floor. If we look in 3 dimensions and shade the view, you can see that we've created a floor at the bottom on level 1. Because we picked the walls when creating the boundary of our floor, if we move a wall, the floor will go with it. That is one of the main reasons you will use the Select Wall tool when creating the boundary of your floor. Let's go ahead and go to level 2 and create a floor there. Again, we'll go to our Architecture tab, Build Panel, and we'll select Floor. We'll hover over one wall, select Tab, and then left click. Unlike the first floor, we'll keep this boundary on the inside part of all the walls. This way we won't see the lines of the floor come through the walls when we're looking at it in elevation or 3D view. Again, we'll hit the green arrow. We'll say no to this for now. And now we've created a second floor. You can see that there's one at the bottom. If I hide this wall, and you can see that there is a wall in the middle at the second level. Let's go back to level 2 quickly. Select the floor, and we can go back into sketch mode by selecting Edit Boundary. And now we can do several things. We can redefine the boundary. Perhaps we want to create a double height space in this area, so we'll bring the floor back a bit. And maybe we want to put a hole in this floor that is circular in shape. Again, we can select any of these tools to draw the boundary of our floor. We'll finish sketch mode with the green arrow and look at it in 3 dimensions. And you can see that we've pulled the floor back from this wall here, and we've put a circle and an opening in the second level floor. One last thing that we'll look at before learning how to create floor types is the slope arrow. We can modify this floor so that it's not just flat, but actually slopes from one side to the other or from one corner to the other by using the slope arrow. If we select the floor, we can edit the boundary, and now instead of picking the boundary line up here, we'll pick the slope arrow. You can only apply one slope arrow per floor. We'll go ahead and draw a slope arrow from one side to the next. If we highlight the arrow, we can go over to the Properties palette for that arrow. And we can define the slope in this dialog box or this palette. We can specify the height at the tail or a slope. We'll go ahead and select height at the tail, and the height offset of the tail will be 1 foot. Let's go ahead and make it 2 feet so it's more pronounced and we can see it more clearly. And the height, or we could select height offset at head. We'll go ahead and just raise the tail up 2 feet and keep the head where it is. If we finish sketch mode, you can see that the floor is now sloped. If we highlight the floor, go back to edit boundary, we go into sketch mode, we can go ahead and modify the slope arrow and change it from corner to corner instead of from one side to the next. If we finish the sketch mode, you can see that it is sloped in that direction now, from corner to corner, not just from one side to the other. Let's go ahead and take a look at defining wall types now. To start looking at defining floor types, I'll go ahead and delete everything but one floor. So we'll go ahead and look at this floor type. Just like walls, we can highlight the floor and edit the type to create new floor types. Before we go ahead and define new types, let's see which floor types are already loaded into Revit. Again, we can highlight the floor, and from this drop-down dialog box in the Properties palette, we can see the predefined wall types in Revit. There's a 3-inch lightweight concrete, a generic 12-inch, a generic 12-inch filled, a lightweight concrete, steel bar joist 14 inches, wood joist with ceramic tile, wood joist with a wood finish, and wood joist with a carpet finish. If we pick one of these, say the wood joist ceramic tile, we can go ahead and look at the type properties, and we will be, similar to the walls, modifying the properties in the structure of the floor type. If we edit the structure, we can see what type of layers this floor is made up of. Keep in mind that the floor types are similar to the wall types in that they have a core boundary, and the very minimum floor you could have is one material in between the two core boundaries. You can have nothing less than that, and you always have to have at least one between the core boundaries. As you're modifying the materials for the floor, you can preview the floor either in section view. Oops, let's go back to the type properties. Here's the preview in section view. So you can see the layers as you're adding or modifying them in this preview pane here. If we go to the structure, we can see that it is made up of going from the top to the bottom, a gray tile, concrete, over plywood, and then the structure. The structure is a wood joist, a 2x10, which is really 9¼ inches deep, and that is this layer here. Now we don't actually model every joist, we just create a space that's the same depth as the joist would be. Next would be the plywood, above that is the concrete, and that's this one here, and then above that is the tile. In Revit, we don't see a pattern for the tile. Let's go ahead and go to the material, Tile Mosaic Gray, and see why that is. On this side of the material library, you can see which material we are using or modifying. And over here is where we can change the properties of its view. We could change the color to something more lively, say yellow. And we can make a surface pattern. We'll go ahead and make a model pattern so it scales. And we can make them 4 inches. So now we'll have a 4-inch tile pattern that's yellow. And we might want to rename this. If I right click, I can rename this to Tile Mosaic Yellow so it'll match our new color. If I hit OK and OK and OK, I now get a yellow pattern. We can create any type of floor that we want in using the type properties and modifying the structure. Keep in mind, if we wanted to change the floor type to something new, we would either duplicate it or rename it like we learned with the walls. The last thing we'll take a look at is editing the shape of the floor using sub-elements. I'm going to go back to my level 1 floor plan view. If I zoom in, you can see the pattern. If I highlight this floor and edit, not edit, but we'll modify the sub-elements by clicking here, you can see that it gets a green dashed line with green squares or grips at the corners. The purpose of modifying the sub-elements is to allow you to be able to slope the floor in a more complex manner than the slope arrow. If I click on the green corners, you can see that their elevation is all set to 0. But we can change that, or we can add a point, say right in the middle. Now that didn't modify the floor because we haven't changed the elevation. But if I select that one in the middle and I say -6 inches, you can see that it puts valleys into the floor and it slopes to the center. Let's go ahead and highlight this, modify the sub-elements, select this again, and let's do this as a -2 so we can look at it in 3D and see if we can notice the difference. You can see, if I go directly as an elevation, that the floor is now sloping towards the center. We could even select this and say -6 feet, and you can see that it went even farther down. And that is how you can modify sub-elements. There's one last thing I'd like to show you in regards to modifying the sub-elements. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that, modify the sub-elements, and I'm going to push this back to, let's say, -4 inches. I'm going to go to my floor plan and create a section view, and we'll take a look at that section view. Now, in this section view, you can see that the entire floor is sloping. Let's get a bigger scale here. The entire floor is sloping to the center. That is, all of the layers are parallel. Sometimes you might want the bottom layer to be flat on the bottom and actually vary in thickness as it is sloping. If we highlight the floor and go to the edit type, we can go to its structure, and at the structure wood joist, we can select the variable. Now the layer structural wood joist is probably not a layer that would vary in thickness, since all of the joists would be 9 1/4. However, foam like a rigid insulation or a concrete deck would be more appropriate. But I'll just show you this for clarity's sake. If I hit OK and OK, you can see that the bottom of this floor is now flat, and that the thickness of that layer actually gets thinner as it gets to the middle. And that is how you can create sloping floors with a flat bottom. That concludes our video on floors.